So I'm planning to try and continue looking at the correlations between the 66 chapters of Isaiah and the 66 books of the Bible. No, Isaiah I think we'd call a major prophet.
Isaiah and the New Testament is a minor prophet. Right?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch exactly what you said.
Isaiah's a major prophet. Yeah, but between him and the New Testament, it's all the minor.
Oh yeah. So on Thursday night we looked at Isaiah 15 compared to Ezra. And Isaiah 15 and 16 are kind of, in my mind, go together. They're both all about Moab. The burden of Moab, it starts out in Isaiah 15, and it is prophecies against them for their transgressions, what's going to happen to them. And then also Ezra and Nehemiah kind of go together. They're both mostly about people returning from Babylon and building the temple in Jerusalem. It seems like I know in the book, I forget which, I think it's in Nehemiah, he talks about Ezra quite a bit. I think they knew each other, and I think they even traveled back and forth some. They didn't necessarily stay in Israel once they got there. I think Nehemiah was kind of required to. The king, when Nehemiah wanted to go, the king supported him and said, "But when are you coming back?" And I'm pretty sure that was Nehemiah. Okay, so details. Isaiah 6, you might want to have two Bibles open. I find that's a lot easier. Yeah, Isaiah 16, and then mostly Nehemiah for the other one. So that's right, you haven't been before for one of these. Yeah, been on Thursday nights.
Nehemiah what?
The first place is going to be Nehemiah 1. So Isaiah 16, verse 4, and I'm just, there's no particular order to these. It's kind of what I found as I went. So in Isaiah 16:4, it says, "Let mine outcasts dwell with thee, Moab. Be thou a covert to them from the face of the spoiler, for the extortioner is at an end. The spoiler ceaseth, the oppressors are consumed out of the land." So it's the key word that I picked up was outcasts. Isaiah or the Lord, whoever we consider as speaking, is asking Moab to take care of his outcasts. Nehemiah chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, the words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah. They came to pass in the month Chislew, and there again I'm just throwing out my best guess on pronunciation. Sorry if I'm wrong. It came to pass in the month Chislew in the 20th year, as I was in Shushan the palace, that Hanani, one of my brethren, came, he and certain men of Judah, and I asked them concerning the Jews that had escaped, which were left of the captivity, and concerning Jerusalem. So I think Nehemiah is still in Babylon, and this Hanani came back from Israel to Babylon, apparently. And he's asking them how it's going over there. And they said unto me, the remnant that are left of the captivity there in the province are in great affliction and reproach. The wall of Jerusalem also is broken down. The gates thereof are burned with fire. And then also Nehemiah 9, starting at 36. Behold, we are servants this day, and for the land that thou gavest unto our fathers to eat the fruit thereof and the good thereof, behold, we are servants in it. And it yieldeth much increase unto the kings whom thou hast set over us because of our sins. Also they have dominion over our bodies and over our cattle at their pleasure, and we are in great distress. So it doesn't use the word outcast, but basically what they are is servants, and walls are broken down and everything. It's kind of a mess. And then I just want to run quick to Numbers 21 for a little light on the next topic. Numbers 21:26. For Heshbon was the city of Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who had fought against the former king of Moab and taken all his land out of his hand, even unto Arnon. So Heshbon belonged to Moab, and then that Sihon guy took it away from him. And it's mentioned in both Isaiah and Nehemiah. So back to Isaiah 16, verse 8. For the fields of Heshbon languish, and the vine of Sibmah. The lords of the heathen have broken down the principal plants thereof. They are come even unto Jazer. They wandered through the wilderness. Her branches are stretched out. They are gone over the sea. In verse 9, therefore I will bewail with the weeping of Jazer, the vine of Sibmah. I will water thee with my tears, O Heshbon, and Elealeh, for the shouting for thy summer fruits and for thy harvest is fallen. And then Nehemiah 9:22. Moreover, thou gavest them kingdoms and nations, and didst divide them into corners, so they possessed the land of Sihon, and the land of the king of Heshbon, and the land of Og, king of Bashan. It's not a major correlation, but it is. They're both talking about Heshbon in Isaiah and Nehemiah. And then just the whole, like I mentioned before, Isaiah 15 and 16 are all about Moab. Verse Isaiah 16:2, it shall be that as a wandering bird cast out of the nest, so the daughters of Moab shall be at the fords of Arnon. And it's all the way through the last verse. But now the Lord hath spoken, saying, within 3 years, as the years of an hireling, and the glory of Moab shall be contemned with all that great multitude, and the remnant shall be very small and feeble. So the whole chapter is about Moab. So there's some mentions of Moab in Nehemiah. Nehemiah 13, 1 and 2. On that day they read in the book of Moses in the audience of the people. This is the book of Moses. Now this is back a ways. And therein was found written that the Ammonite and the Moabite should not come into the congregation of God forever, because they met not the children of Israel with bread and with water, but hired Balaam against them, that he should curse them. Howbeit our God turned the curse into a blessing. And then also Nehemiah 13, same chapter, verse 32. Oh, I'm sorry, 23. In those days also saw I Jews that had married wives of Ashdod, of Ammon, and of Moab. We got that same situation that was mentioned in Ezra that we talked about on Thursday night. They had a lot, especially of the worst offenders were the leaders of the Jews, but they and a lot of people had married strange wives that they had been commanded not to, and they actually got it right in Ezra. But this is, I guess, must be some of the same period of time before they got it right. So that's pretty much all I have for correlations between Isaiah 16 and Nehemiah. I've got a couple of interesting things that I noticed. Isaiah 16:9, just the first verse. Therefore I will bewail with the weeping of Jazer, the vine of Sibmah. And then in Jeremiah 48, verse 32. O vine of Sibmah, I will weep for thee with the weeping of Jazer. Real close to identical. Just interesting to me. Okay, and I kind of got interested in the basic history of the whole thing, and I got all tangled up and didn't have time, or didn't feel like it was kind of off topic, but it's really interesting how, like I said, Ezra and Nehemiah both apparently, well, I don't know about both of them, but some of the people, there were groups of people at different times that went up. And it's in Ezra, I believe it is. There's 4 different kings mentioned. I think in chronological order, I think it was Cyrus. He was the first one that was his idea to send a group of Jews to rebuild the temple. And then Ahasuerus, Artaxerxes, and Darius. And just a little bit of history, I guess, kind of interesting. Artaxerxes, I don't know if there were maybe 2 people with the same name, but at one point he listened to some enemies in Israel, wrote them letters, and he stopped the work on the temple. And then later on, it seems like it was his idea to do it again, or I don't know if which one happened first, or if it was even the same guy, but it's the same name in the Bible, Artaxerxes. Then there's some I didn't really get to understand. There's some Babylonian names of Jewish people, and they also have Jewish names, I think. I didn't get to study that, but there's a couple of those. Gets to be kind of interesting. There's a lot of room to dig if a person wanted to. And let's see, we got 11:30. Move on to Isaiah 17 and the book of Esther, which is the 17th book of the Bible. Isaiah 17, starting at verse 12. uh, 12 through 14. Woe to the multitude of many people, which make a noise like the noise of the seas, and to the rushing of nations that make a rushing like the rushing of mighty waters. The nations shall rush like the rushing of many waters, but God shall rebuke them. And they shall flee far off, and shall be chased as the chaff of the mountains before the wind, and like a rolling thing before the whirlwind. Behold, at eventide trouble, and before the morning he is not. This is the portion of them that spoil us, and the lot of them that rob us. So, verse 12 says, woe to the multitude of many people. So that caught my eye, because in the book of Esther, I believe it's Ahasuerus was the king, controlled a whole lot of territory with a lot of different peoples and nations and everything. I think we'll go ahead and read Esther chapter 3, verses 1 through 15. That's the whole chapter, Esther chapter 3. After these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. Remember, Agagite, I'm sure, refers to King Agag that Saul left alive when God told him to wipe out all the Amalekites. So here's another result of him not obeying. After these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. Then the king's servants which were in the king's gate said unto Mordecai, why transgressest thou the king's commandment? Now it came to pass when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman, to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. So you're going to see that this gets to be a whole big thing just because of one guy that wouldn't bow down. He got all upset about it. And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. In the first month, that is the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast Pur, that is the lot, before Haman from day to day and from month to month, to the 12th month, that is the month Adar. And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people, neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business, to bring it into the king's treasuries. Of course, he's planning on taking everything of all the Jews that he killed, so it'll probably be billions of times more than he's given to the king. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. And the king said unto Haman, the silver is given to thee, the people also to do with them as it seemeth good to thee. Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month, and it was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants and to the governors that were over every province, to the rulers of every people of every province, according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus was it written, and sealed with the king's ring. And the letters were sent by posts into all the king's provinces, to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. The copy of the writing for a commandment to given in every province was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day. The post went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Shushan the palace. And the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city Shushan was perplexed. So I think quite a few people at least probably know the basic story of the book of Esther. She is Jewish. There's that at the beginning of Esther, the king's wife refused to come and dance for him, so he got rid of her and searched and ended up with Esther, which I don't think he knew was Jewish at the time until later. Okay. Back in when we read in Isaiah 17, 12 through 14, we read it all, but in verse 14 it says, and behold, at eventide trouble, and before the morning he is not. This is a portion of them that spoil us, and a lot of them that rob us. I don't see that it had meant, when it says, and before the morning he is not, I don't know that we had been talking about any individual person. It kind of, it catches your eye when they're talking about the nations and multitude of many people, and then it says, and before the morning he is not. So I took that to mean Haman, which we're going to look at here. Esther chapter 7, verses 1 to 10. I'm going to read the whole thing, I guess. 7. Well, okay, so rehearse a little bit. So Haman got all upset and convinced the king to send out all that proclamation that it's okay to kill the Jews on that certain day, and he plans to make it happen. And of course, Mordecai and Esther talk to each other, and it's a big sadness. All the Jews in the whole group of provinces are are all worried about that, of course, weeping and wailing. And this is Esther had decided, even though it was not allowed for anybody to approach the king unless they were invited. So she decided to take her life in her hands and approach him to bring up the subject. And the first 10 verses of Esther chapter 7 is part of that story. So the king and Haman, Esther invited Haman to come eat with her and the king. So the king and Haman came to banquet with Esther the queen, and the king said again unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine. There had been a banquet the day before, and all she said then was that, let's have another banquet, and then I'll tell you what my request is. And the king said again unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed even to the half of the kingdom. Then Esther the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, Who is he, and where is he, that durst presume in his heart to do so? And Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. And the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden. And Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was. Then said the king, Will he force the queen also before me in the house? As a word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And Harbona, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, Behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, Hang him thereon. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. So I am guessing that the banquet happened in the evening, and that that verse in Isaiah 17, verse 17, 14, and behold, at evening tide trouble, and before the morning he is not. So I take that to be referring to the trouble that Esther had her request, and Haman ended up hanged. And then forget exactly why, but let's go to Esther 8, starting at 11. Okay, it's just kind of more completing the story a little bit, I guess. When the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together and to stand for their life. So, long story short, I should have probably mentioned before that thing ever happened, in fact, the night before, Haman was planning to ask the king to let him hang Mordecai. He had actually built a gallows. I think his wife and some friends put him up to it because he was all upset that Mordecai wouldn't bow down to him. So he had built that gallows and he was planning to ask the king to let him hang Mordecai. And the night before he was going to do that, the king couldn't sleep. So he had some records brought in, and he discovered that Mordecai had been the one that had revealed a plot against the king's life. And so
What goes around comes around.
Yep.
What goes around comes around.
Yeah. So that was kind of interesting. So he just found that out, and here comes Haman. Must have been morning. And the first thing the king says to Haman is, What should I do to somebody that I want to honor? And Haman thought it was probably him that he was talking about, so he said, let him ride on the king's horse and wear the king's clothes and wear the king's crown and all this stuff. And so the king said, okay, you go and do all that for Mordecai. That was kind of interesting.
Oh yeah, he sent the couriers, he didn't do it himself.
Yeah. And then after Haman was hanged, then he promoted Mordecai more, made him second to the king, which Haman had been, and gave him a lot of power. And Mordecai and Esther and the king agreed that, it doesn't specifically say that here, but I'd read in other places that their law was that once the king made a proclamation, you can never change it. It cannot be reversed. So he had made that proclamation that all the Jews could be killed. So now he made another proclamation that the Jews could defend themselves. And that's what is referred to here in Esther 8, 11, and 12, wherein the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together and to stand for their life, to destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people and province that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. Upon one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar. I don't know why I didn't put it down, but they ended up, the Jews ended up killing, I think it was like 75,000 people. But it kind of interesting, they didn't want to take any of their possessions like had been planned against them. And then here kind of side notes again, Esther 8:17. And in every province and in every city whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, that the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them. They saw that Mordecai was promoted and everything, and that's why the people of the non-Jews were afraid really to attack the Jews, because they saw that he had so much power and everything. So God just worked it all out. And this, I thought it was interesting. Many of the people of the land became Jews. And then another interesting one, I think it's Esther 9, starting at 1. Oh, now in the 12th month, that is the month Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put into execution, in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had rule over them that hated them. The Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus to lay hand on such as sought their hurt, and no man could withstand them, for the fear of them fell upon all people. And all the rulers of the provinces and the lieutenants and the deputies and officers of the king helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house. And his fame went out through all the provinces, for this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. And then verse 16. But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together and stood for their lives. Okay, the other Jews is referring to besides those in the capital Shushan. It had talked about them, but I didn't read it. But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes 70 and 5,000, but they laid not their hands on the prey. What, I kind of forgot something. Oh, I know. Back in Isaiah, we had 12 through 14. Okay. In verse 13, the nations shall rush like the rushing of many waters. I assume it doesn't actually talk in Nehemiah about the multitudes rushing to attack the Jews. I assume some did. I don't think the Jews just went looking for enemies. The nations shall rush like the rushing of many waters, but God shall rebuke them. They shall flee far off and shall be chased as the chaff of the mountains before the wind and like a rolling thing before the whirlwind. I assume some of that happened in order for the Jews to have ended up killing 75,000. There's actually, I think, another 500 plus 300 in Shushan besides the 75,000. So maybe too much history there, but let's see. Well, I guess maybe we could do one more. Isaiah 18. There's not a whole bunch. I think it could fit in our time slot good enough here. So Isaiah 18, 2 and 7. And be honest with you, I'm not real sure who is being talked about too much in this whole chapter. Woe to the land shadowing with wings, which is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. I feel like that maybe it should be Egypt, but I'm not sure. And then verse 2 is the main one I wanted to look at. That sendeth ambassadors by the sea, even in vessels of bulrushes upon the water, saying, Go, ye swift messengers, to a nation scattered and peeled, to a people terrible from their beginning hitherto, a nation meted out and trodden down, whose land the rivers have spoiled. And then also verse 7, in that time shall the present be brought unto the Lord of hosts of a people scattered and peeled, and from a people terrible from the beginning hitherto, a nation meted out and trodden under foot, whose land the rivers have spoiled, to the place of the name of the Lord of hosts, the Mount Zion. So the key things I was looking at were this scattered and peeled and meted out and trodden down. And in Isaiah, it's talking about a nation. And so it's not, to me, it's not a real strong correlation, but I feel like that's a pretty good description of what happened to Job. And that's the 18th book of the Bible that we're going to look at comparing to Isaiah 18. So Job 1 verses 14, 15, and 17. There came a messenger unto Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the asses feeding beside them, and the Sabaeans fell upon them and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. In verse 17, while he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, the Chaldeans made out 3 bands and fell upon the camels and have carried them away. Yea, and slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. So enemies have taken Job's livestock, several different kinds there, and I consider that a scattering visited upon Job. You know, if you take all of his possessions, his livestock were scattered. And then Job chapter 2, 7 and 8. The Lord, no, I'm sorry, 2, 7 and 8. So went Satan forth from the presence of the Lord and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal, and he sat down among the ashes. So that's kind of like a peeling. Job is scraping himself because of boils. So the scattered and peeled part corresponds there to my way of thinking. And then in Job chapter 7, uh, 4 through 7 plus 19. When I lie down, I say, when shall I arise and the night begun? And I am full of tossings to and fro unto the dawning of the day. My flesh is clothed with worms and clods of dust. My skin is broken and become loathsome. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle and are spent without hope. Oh, remember that my life is wind. Mine eye shall no more see good. And 19. How long wilt thou not depart from me, nor let me alone till I swallow down my spittle? That reminds me of the meted out and trodden down that was mentioned in Isaiah. Job is telling us about the misery he's got. And then also Job 9, verses 17 and 18. For he breaketh me with a tempest, and multiplieth my wounds without cause. He will not suffer me to take my breath, but filleth me with bitterness. More of the same, meted out and trodden down. And 10, verses 1 and 10. My soul is weary of my life. I will leave my complaint upon myself. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul. And verse 10. Hast thou not poured me out as milk and curdled me like cheese? Job 16, starting at verse 7. But now he hath made me weary. Thou hast made desolate all my company, and thou hast filled me with wrinkles, which is a witness against me. And my leanness rising up in me beareth witness to my face. He teareth me in his wrath who hateth me. He gnasheth upon me with his teeth. Mine enemy sharpeneth his eyes upon me. They have gaped upon me with their mouth. They have smitten me upon the cheek reproachfully. They have gathered themselves together against me. God hath delivered me to the ungodly, and turned me over unto the hands of the wicked. I was at ease, but he hath broken me asunder. He hath also taken me by my neck, and shaken me to pieces, and set me up for his mark. His archers compass me round about. He cleaveth my reins asunder, and doth not spare. He poureth out my gall upon the ground. He breaketh me with breach upon breach. He runneth upon me like a giant. I have sewed sackcloth upon my skin, and defiled my horn in the dust. My face is foul with weeping, and on my eyelids is the shadow of death. More meeting out and trotting down. And then Job 30, verses 8 to 10. Chapter 3, starting at 8. They were children of fools, yea, children of base men. They were viler than the earth, and now am I their song. Yea, I am their byword. They abhor me, they flee far from me, and spare not to spit in my face. More meeting out and trotting down. And I think maybe we'll stop there. That covers, what do you cover? 16, 17, and 18. And then I suppose we should sing another one.